First Leviticus 2:13. Salt and covenant. Salt was required in every grain offering as a sign of God's unbreakable covenant. It represented permanence, purity, and loyalty in relationship with God. To omit salt meant the offering was incomplete or insincere. Salt preserved the sacredness and continuity of divine worship. 2. Numbers 18:19. A covenant of salt. A covenant of salt symbolized lasting, enduring agreement. Unlike other substances, salt resists decay. It preserves truth. This showed God's promises were not just emotional, but permanent. It underscored the divine nature of long-term commitment. 3. 2 Kings 2:20-21. Salt purifies water. Elisha used salt to miraculously cleanse polluted water. The act symbolized divine intervention through purity and healing. Salt reversed a natural curse and restored life to the land. It showed that God uses purity to restore what is broken. 4. Ezekiel 16:4. Salt and newborns. Newborns were traditionally rubbed with salt to disinfect and strengthen. The absence of this practice in the verse represents neglect and shame. Salt marked care, identity, and proper initiation into life. The image connects purification with early nurture and dignity. 5. Matthew 5:13. Salt of the earth. Jesus called his followers the salt of the earth, a weighty identity. Salt was essential to life in the ancient world, not just seasoning. Being salt meant preventing moral decay and preserving goodness. It's a call to preserve truth in a deteriorating world. 6. Mark 9:49. Salted with fire. The phrase blends purification, salt, with testing, fire. It reflects the refining trials believers go through to grow. Everyone will face trials that purify faith like salt purifies wounds. It's a process of transformation towards spiritual integrity. 7. Mark 9:50. Have salt in yourselves. Salt here stands for inner moral sharpness and relational wisdom. It's a call to carry within yourself what preserves and heals. Losing saltiness is becoming ineffective in spiritual influence. Peace with others flows from the purity within oneself. 8. Colossians 4:6. Speech seasoned with salt. Paul urges that our words be wise, gracious, and thoughtful. Salted speech is not just pleasant, but impactful and discerning. It implies clarity, depth, and truth without harshness. Salt represents maturity in communication, not empty flattery. 9. Genesis 19:26. Lot's wife becomes salt. Turning into salt symbolizes sudden, irreversible judgment. Lot's wife clung to what God was destroying, her past. The image of salt suggests barrenness, stillness, and warning. Her fate became a standing testimony of disobedience. 10th Ezra 6:9. Salt in temple worship. Salt was required in offerings for proper temple ritual. It signified sanctification and God's standard of perfection. Its inclusion was essential, not optional, in holy worship. It represented spiritual purity and consistency before God. 11. Ezekiel 43:24. Priests throw salt on offerings. Salt added to sacrifices symbolized spiritual sincerity and wholeness. Its ritual use reflected God's desire for holy offerings. This action cleansed and prepared the gift before the Lord. Salt was God's seal on acceptable worship. 12th Job 6:6. Is tasteless food eaten without salt? Job uses salt as a metaphor for what makes life meaningful. Salt enhances what is otherwise bland or unbearable. The absence of salt represents lifelessness or emptiness. Salt signifies the necessary essence that brings things to life. 13th Deuteronomy 29:23. Salt land of judgment. Here, salt is linked with desolation and divine judgment. A land ruined by sin becomes salty and unproductive. Salt turns fertile ground into a sterile desert. It's a vivid image of the aftermath of rebellion. 14. Judges 9:45. City sown with salt was scattered on conquered land to make it barren. It symbolized complete destruction and irreversible conquest. No future could grow from salted soil. It was final. This act marked a physical and spiritual end. 15. Jeremiah 17:6. Like a shrub in a salt land, the unrighteous are compared to plants in a salty wasteland. This land cannot support growth, symbolizing spiritual death. Salt here represents isolation, spiritual dryness, and curse. The environment reflects the soul separated from God. 16. Isaiah 30:24. Salt for animals. Salt was considered essential even for livestock health. It sustained life and supported strength in labor animals. This detail affirms the necessity of salt for all flesh. It subtly ties salt to divine provision and care. 17. 2. Chronicles 13:5. Covenant of salt with David. God's covenant with David was called a covenant of salt. This emphasized its eternal, unchangeable nature. Salt made the promise sacred, binding, and preservative. It highlighted divine kingship rooted in lasting fidelity. 18. Proverbs 27:17. Iron sharpens iron. Though not directly about salt, the principle of sharpening fits. Salt sharpens flavor, just as friendship sharpens. Matthew 5:10-12. Blessed are the persecuted. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus pronounces a blessing on those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, declaring that theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This blessing builds on the immediately preceding verses where he calls his followers the salt of the earth. Salt, in the biblical context, served both as a preservative and a purifier. It was a valuable substance that maintained the integrity of food and symbolically represented covenant faithfulness and purity. When Jesus speaks of persecution here, he is not merely highlighting suffering, but the cost of being distinct, of preserving truth and resisting moral and spiritual decay. Being salt in a corrupt world means standing in stark contrast to its values. Salt's presence inevitably provokes a response. It stings in wounds and halts corruption. In this sense, persecution is not just inevitable. It is a sign that the salt is doing its work. A believer who never faces resistance from the world may need to ask whether they have compromised their saltiness. Jesus is clear. Those who faithfully reflect the righteousness of God's kingdom will face slander, exclusion, and sometimes even violence. Yet paradoxically, they are blessed. This blessing is not rooted in the pain of persecution itself, but in the divine affirmation and eternal reward it brings. Rejoice and be glad, Jesus says, for your reward is great in heaven. This is not merely comfort for the afflicted, but a redefinition of what it means to be successful and honored in the kingdom of God. The world may shame the righteous, but heaven celebrates them. The prophets, too, were persecuted, and standing in their company connects believers to a long lineage of covenant faithfulness. Persecution, then, is not a mark of failure, but a badge of authenticity. It proves the potency of one's witness and the purity of one's devotion. Furthermore, it participates in the preserving work of salt, resisting decay and holding ground for truth. In this way, suffering for righteousness becomes a powerful testimony. It refines the believer, deepens dependence on God, and draws others to the gospel by the sheer contrast it presents to worldly values. Moreover, the kingdom reward that Jesus promises reframes how believers understand suffering. It is not purposeless, but redemptive. Persecution becomes a crucible that purifies faith, just as fire purifies gold. It separates cultural Christianity from true discipleship. Only those who truly believe the gospel will endure mockery, exclusion, or loss for the sake of Christ. In enduring such trials, believers are not alone. They are united with Christ, who suffered before them, and with the global church, many of whom suffer still. In summary, Matthew 5:10-12 anchors the metaphor of salt in real-life consequences. Being salt means being confrontational simply by being faithful. It may lead to persecution, but that persecution is not in vain. It is part of the refining and preserving work that defines the life of a disciple. It is also the pathway to eternal reward, promised and secured by the one who calls his people blessed, even when the world calls them cursed. Luke 14:34, salt that loses flavor. In Luke 14:34, Jesus presents a stark and sobering warning. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? This seemingly simple statement carries profound implications for the spiritual life of the believer. In ancient times, salt was highly valued for its preservative and seasoning properties. It was also used in religious rituals and covenant making. However, Jesus speaks here of salt that has lost its flavor, a contradiction in terms that reveals a deep spiritual truth. Salt, by nature, should preserve, flavor, and purify. When it fails to do so, it becomes useless. This passage follows a discourse on the cost of discipleship. Jesus has just finished teaching about the necessity of counting the cost before following him, comparing discipleship to building a tower or waging war. In this context, the salt metaphor underscores the importance of commitment and integrity in the Christian life. A disciple who starts the journey but loses their edge, who becomes spiritually apathetic or morally compromised, has lost their saltiness. Such a person is no longer fulfilling their God-given role in the world. The idea of salt losing its flavor serves as a metaphor for spiritual stagnation. It reflects a life once vibrant in faith, but now dulled by complacency, fear, or worldliness. Jesus is not suggesting that believers will be cast away at the first sign of weakness. Rather, he is warning that a faith without ongoing transformation and obedience becomes ineffective. The call to discipleship is not a one-time decision, but a daily, disciplined walk of surrender. Salt that has lost its savor cannot fulfill its purpose, and so it is thrown away.